Week 14 is officially here with week 13 already now in the rearview mirror. There are so many important things that we got to go over. For starters, we're going to not only mention the players that you need to be dropping, but it is another Bye-Mageddon. We have the final round of bye weeks, and it is a hefty one. So we're going to not only go over players that you should be dropping, but also players you should be adding, especially during the very critical part of the fantasy season as the season winds down. But before we do that, it's very important that we go over some of the highlights from this past week. For starters, Jameis Winston and Jerry Jeudy put on a show on a losing effort on Monday Night Football. Jameis Winston threw for 497 passing yards, had 4 touchdowns, and of course gave us the Jameis Winston experience by also throwing 3 interceptions. Jerry Jeudy was absolutely masterful versus his old team, the Denver Broncos. He had 9 receptions on 13 targets, had 235 yards receiving as well as a touchdown. Brock Bowers for the Las Vegas Raiders continues to shine as he gets nearer and nearer to shattering the all-time season record by receptions by a rookie tight end. He had 10 receptions on 14 targets for 140 yards and had 1 touchdown. Bowers is now only 3 receptions away from breaking Laporta's rookie reception tight end record that he had last year, and is also 192 receiving yards away from Mike Ditka's record from 1961 as well. And for the Steelers, we saw Russell Wilson put on a show versus the Cincinnati Bengals. He threw for 414 yards, had 3 touchdowns, had his best fantasy output of the season, and Josh Allen went complete Superman mode on Sunday Night Football. Not only during the snow game, threw 148 passing yards, but had 2 touchdowns, had 1 rushing touchdown, and also had 1 receiving touchdown. Really put it all together and put on a great showing for those of you that had him in fantasy football. As I mentioned, we have a huge bye week coming up with our second and final Bye-Mageddon of the season, but let's go over some players you should be cutting. The first one is going to be, unfortunately, Kareem Hunt from the Kansas City Chiefs. Isaiah Pacheco came back into the mix, and we saw their snap share almost be exactly identical. We saw Kareem Hunt lead the way with a 38% snap share versus Pacheco's 37%. We also saw P. Ryan have a pretty good amount of work as well, but overall Hunt only had 7 carries, 15 yards, and I believe that now at this point we're going to see the work get more and more hefty on the side of Pacheco, which means that Kareem Hunt, at best, if you can't drop him, he is best utilized as a stash, especially for handcuff value. Next one is going to be the injured running backs that we saw get featured this past week. You have CNC with the PCL tear. He's going to be out for the season. You can drop him. Austin Eckler, his second concussion of the season, more than likely will not be available until week 18. Therefore, he's not available. You should cut him. J.K. Dobbins, unfortunately, was also placed on the IR this past weekend. You can also expect him to be dropped, considering that he's not going to be available until about week 17. At that point, even if he comes back for championship week, you may have better options there. So these 3 injured running backs, unfortunately, are going to be guys that you need to be getting rid of on your rosters. Now, a few wide receivers to consider. This one is actually quite surprising, especially after looking and doing research on what this guy's stats have been over the past few weeks, but you're going to have to drop Deebo Samuel. San Francisco overall hasn't had a good season, but Deebo specifically is now coming off his 3rd straight single-digit performance game, and he's only had 1 top 10 finish this season. With the injuries that we've seen this offensive line have, as well as some of the key weapons like Ayuk and now CMC, Deebo, unfortunately, is someone that is not going to offer much upside, being that this offense seems to be in shambles. You can feel confident in dropping him. Next one is going to be Quentin Johnson from the Los Angeles Chargers. After having a really good showing from week 9 to week 11, he just has not been the same. He's now come off 2 terrible performances, and someone that is not worth rostering anymore on your fantasy rosters, especially with us coming to a really important stretch of the fantasy season. And then lastly, it's going to be Tank Dell from the Houston Texans, and this is with him also filling in for injured Nico Collins. He only saw his fantasy production go up a little bit. He averaged 11.8 fantasy points per game with Nico out. He's only averaged 8.3 with him in. Unfortunately, his sophomore season has been nothing but a slump, and one that fantasy managers would like to forget. Hey, we're about to go over players you should be adding, but before we do so, a lot of you are not already subscribed, so do me a solid. If you're getting value, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. Let's go over the waiver wire ads that you need to be targeting for week 14. And the first one is going to be Isaac Guerendo from the San Francisco 49ers. And the reason why he's valuable is that not only do we just find out that CMC is going to be out with the PCL tear, but also Jordan Mason, who was slated to be the handcuff behind CMC, is also going to be placed on the IR. And the upside here is that San Francisco is going to have a soft schedule going up against defenses that actually rank pretty low when it comes to most points allowed in fantasy points to opposing and running backs. For starters, you have Chicago that ranks 11th in that category. Then you have the Rams who rank 9th, and then also the Miami Dolphins who rank 10th. Another player worth adding this week is going to be Nick Westrbook Ikhine from the Tennessee Titans. He's currently only rostered in 19.9% of ESPN leagues. Had 3 receptions on 8 targets for 61 yards and 2 touchdowns. week 17, he has been the wide receiver 13, averaging 13.8 points per game. As it stands right now, he ranks 5th among all wide receivers in yards per reception. Also ranks 2nd in fantasy points per target. Now, I did go over some quarterbacks you should be stashing last week, but I'm going to have you focus on exclusively on Russell Wilson from the Pittsburgh Steelers. Currently, he's rostered in 43.1% of ESPN leagues. He did have a great game this past week. He's also thrown more than 28 passing attempts in each of the games that he's played since week 7. He's currently also ranked 2nd among quarterbacks in his EPX rating. He's also been 2nd in yards per attempt, 1st in deep ball accuracy. Now, I know that the next couple weeks is going to have some pretty tough matchups when it comes to secondaries that are able to sustain quarterbacks in fantasy points. However, in week 16 and week 17, he has 2 favorable matchups. The first one is going to be versus the Baltimore Ravens, who allow the 4th most points to opposing quarterbacks, and then he faces the Kansas City Chiefs, who actually allow the 11th most in the exact same category. Now, another player I want you to consider is going to be his teammate Pat Freiermuth, tight end for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He caught 6 receptions on 7 targets for 68 yards and had 1 touchdown. And the big thing here is that he's going to have really favorable matchups down the stretch. Another reason why I would consider Freiermuth is because of the upcoming schedule that he has. He's going to be facing the Cleveland Browns, who allow the 16th most points to opposing tight ends. Then he faces Baltimore, who allows the 11th most, and then also Kansas City, who allows the 4th most in that exact same category. Now, lastly, I did tell you to add Bryce Young, but I'm not going to actually focus on that, because if you want to check out more information on that, check out this video over here. However, I'm going to be focusing on one of his teammates, and that's going to be Xavier Legette. I know that Adam Thielen should be getting the more popular recognition here. However, I've been liking Legette since week 8. He's had 4+ targets in every single game he's been playing, averaging 10.6 fantasy points during that stretch. After the tough matchup versus Philly, we will see him facing the Dallas Cowboys, who are middle of the pack versus opposing wide receivers in fantasy, as well as the Buccaneers, who rank also 11th in that same category of most points allowed to opposing wide receivers. Hey, you made it to the very end of this video. Thank you so much for watching. Do me a solid. If you got value in this video, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, check out some of these other videos that I have here on the channel that'll help you out as we get ready for the fantasy football postseason. Thank you once again for watching. Until next time, take care. God bless. Peace.